Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network and also at 21stcenturywire.com. Thank you so much for joining us for this live broadcast. This is episode 531 of this weekly Omnibus News and Analysis radio program brought to you here on ACR. We're also streaming out live on X, on Facebook, on our fan page, 21st Century Wire. Also, Facebook might re-energize a little bit now that Mark Zuckerberg has come clean on his authoritarian machinations and seems to have prostrated himself, asking for forgiveness to the world on the Joe Rogan podcast. Oh, it was a big mistake. The government pressured me too hard. I'm sorry. We're going to lift all that fact-checking and censorship. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how much freedom of reach we get on Facebook, because it's been abysmal really for the last 4 years. But anyway, well done, Mark, and like the haircut. We're also going to be joined by Bryan McClain, a.k.a. Hesher, from Alternate Current Radio, host of The Boiler Room. He's going to join us in the first hour, as well as Adam Clark. Ruckus is also going to join us a little bit later. He'll come in probably midstream. The theme of today's show, if you haven't seen it already, is the Faux War on Terror 2.0. And we did a space last night just to kind of warm this topic up. And as I told our audience and as our co-hosts, kind co-host Hesher and Benjamin Rubenstein, both co-hosting last night, here's the space there. The Faux War on Terror 2.0. Pretty amazing discussion. I think this space probably went about, just over 4 hours and 25 minutes. It was amazing. We had a great panel, great discussion. We covered a very wide range of topics, but really kicked it off talking about this fake war on terror 2.0 that is clearly in the works right now. There's no question about it. All the signs are there. They're putting up all the signals. The dog whistles are becoming bullhorns, ladies and gentlemen. The dog whistles are becoming bullhorns. So that's why we're doing this program here. That's the our graphic for today's show. As you can see, you've got Donald Trump, JD Vance doing his tutorials there. Only 40 years old, I think. JD is about just around 40. So he's a young buck. Does he have the experience, the wherewithal to withstand the deep state, or will he be absorbed and become part of the deep state? He's young enough to go either direction. We'll see. He's got the protection of Trump. Is that going to be enough? We'll see. Elon Musk there off to the side, a sort of a clownish animated character. But don't let the playful demeanor fool you. He's in there for the big bucks to cash in on this global war on terror, this faux war on terror 2.0. We're going to look at a couple of media clips by some of the usual suspects that are selling this new war on terror. We'll do that with our co-host. Let me bring up to the stage right now Bryan McClain, aka Hesher, is joining us from the Alternate Current Radio Network on the live stream right now. Hesher, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Hey, Patrick, great to be here with you. That was an epic space last night. I want to give a big shout out to everybody that joined us. It was really good, because of the diversity of thought and personalities on that space. We were really able to kind of tie together the larger picture of what's going on in the Middle East, what has gone on in the Middle East, and what is now all the rage here in the United States, because you can't really separate them from each other, although it's hard to find a conversation that ties it all together like that one. So thanks for hosting that.
No, it was great, and I appreciate you. And Hesher, you've done a few spaces. I know you're new to that arena, to that format. What do you think about it? I've been doing them for a couple of years, but I know you've been so busy on the video and radio broadcast side. You've now recently come over to do X Spaces. What do you think about the format, the interactions? What are your thoughts?
I like it. It sort of harkens back to where we first started, audio only, and a lot of audience interaction, via the chats and the comments. I like the ability for people listening to, request to be able to come on and say something, or drop something in that, the live comments underneath it. It's also really cool because it's logged, so someone can go back if they miss it, or they can, bug out if they have to, go get food or whatever. They can come back to it, pick up where they left off. So it's great, and it's a different audience. It's interesting when you're working multiple platforms at the same time. Which is what we're doing right now, right? We're going out to, well, we would have been going out to Spreaker, but that's a whole nother story. We're going out to YouTube, going out to Rumble, sometimes going out to BitChute, always going out to X, Rockfin if we're doing Boiler Room. So one thing I've found difficult is managing all those desperate chats. It's hard. I have a lot of monitor real estate, but I don't quite have enough to see everybody's chats. But I really like, back to your question, I like the X space. I like the interaction, and really enjoying it. So I think it's a really good thing to have in the media arsenal.
And one of the it is great, and yeah, it's kind of like to me, it's kind of like the ideal radio, because you can basically queue up callers and actually see them. It's got good visuals on the people on the panel. You can bring people up, push people down as well. So it's got that kind of radio caller control at your fingertips, which is hugely convenient. And then you can bring in your threads, your tweets up in the nest and down in the comment section, build up opposition research during the broadcast and during the live space. So that's really amazing. So we try to use that to the max. And our goal on spaces is, and I think you kind of can see what we're doing here already. We're there to educate people. Some people like to do chill out spaces and just kind of chew the fat. We're there to kind of get people really, really informed in a deep, deep way. So the War on Terror 2.0. This is interesting. I'm going to bring this up on our screen here. Ahmed Mansour. Okay, who is this guy? This was a character that was introduced last night on our space. So we're talking about the Faux War on Terror 2.0. Who is this character? Well, it turns out this is the Egyptian Julani. This is the Egyptian Julani. This is a new character. It's been introduced on stage. A big shout out to Hadidi. She was on the space last night, and also Suppress News and First Blood and others, some of these other accounts that do some serious research on these extremists, and they share it on X as well. And this is a thread done by Hadidi here, as you can see. And if you scroll down, he's basically talking about an Egyptian dressed in HTS costume. That's al-Qaeda in Syria, approved by the United States and Israel. He's not here to free Egypt. He's here to destabilize it, leaving a vulnerable and easy for the taking. So to do to Egypt what al-Qaeda, what HTS did to Syria, which is allow Israel to liquidate its military. How convenient would that be for Tel Aviv and Washington, especially in light of the Greater Israel Project? And some more details here. Excellent thread. Obviously, if you go to my Twitter feed on X, you go to at 21wire. That's my Patrick Henningsen, and you'll see this thread excellent thread by Hadidi here. And also, you want to follow her. She's got a great account. And in the 2000s, Mansour was involved with al-Qaeda in Iraq, funny enough, and was an alumni of Camp Cuka, along with al-Jilani. So isn't that interesting, Hesher? A new protagonist has entered the fore here, and it seems like he's been well branded, and they've set him up here. His resume is perfect for the kind of mainstream media al-Qaeda ISIS story, that kind of perfect CNN backstory, when you can get like Jim Sciutto together with whoever, Pamela Brown, their legal correspondent, and talk about the terrorist bona fides of these extremists that just seemingly pop out of nowhere. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, we should bring Infidel Pharaoh on one of these one day, because he's a Egyptian American, and he has been here for quite a while, but he's got family there, and he's well versed in how the Muslim Brotherhood kind of snuck in and got their claws into Egypt after the fake revolution that was kind of caused by, or at least spurred on by, Dorsey's Twitter, Twitter 1.0. So maybe next week we can bring him on to discuss that. But yeah, you can kind of see where this is headed.
Yeah. So look at this. Camp Cuka 2011 released. And this is the interesting thing. I really love Hesher, released from Camp Cuka. So basically sheep dipped by the United States military while they were being trained. And apparently this place was the perfect training camp for extremists and, al-Qaeda, ISIS types. So this is where all the officers, so this is kind of like the Sandhurst equivalent, if you know what Sandhurst Military Academy is in Britain. So this is like ISIS Sandhurst, Camp Cuka, run by the Americans, of course. And they let out Jolani and al-Mansur to basically wreak havoc after that. And so they did. And the rest is history here. Jolani, however, is no longer wearing the turban. He has been upgraded to a new Savile Row suit. So he's got a very expensive wardrobe at the moment. He's wearing a Rolex, totally presentable to Western politicians. So as the U.S. was withdrawing from Iraq, Mansur found his way to Jabhat al-Nusra and learned his trade under the tutelage of al-Jolani himself, who flitted between ISIS and al-Qaeda. So they're introducing this new character. And so Egypt, of course, is the destabilization target. Now, the question that we were asking last night, Hesher, is it really in the U.S. interest to destabilize Egypt? Is it in the Israeli interest to destabilize Egypt? Because at the moment, al-Sisi, he's a good puppet for Tel Aviv, for Washington. Why would, all they have to do is pay him off with whatever, and then arms worth, 3 or 4 billion a year, keep the Egyptian SCAF, the Supreme Military Council, in power. This is working well for Washington, Tel Aviv. What do they want to tip the apple cart, Hesher, here and pull Syria south of Israel and Gaza? I mean, what do you think? Oh, hold on for a second.
Honestly, I'm really not sure, Patrick. I mean, I kind of figured until this happened, Egypt and Turkey were sort of right where, NATO wanted them. I kind of figured, hey, these countries are pretty much already under the thumb. But now, with this development, I'm starting to ask the same question. What does this mean? Where's this going? What happens if there's a coup or a leadership change? What does that mean? What does that mean for Israel? Obviously, it would be something that they're behind. What does it mean for the ongoing conflict? Does that mean it's going to get bigger? I mean, I really don't know the answer.
Yeah, we'll see how it pans out, but it does provide. I think it's a nudge. Personally, I think this is a nudge to create a story, a beginning of a story, and the beginning of the story is there's an al-Qaeda cell in the Sinai Peninsula, and the extremism has reared its ugly head in the Sinai. These ungovernable Bedouin tribal areas. They always say the tribal areas, right? And so, what's the solution? Well, it's the United States is going to have to deploy in Egypt. We have to send our forces, the British, the Americans, maybe even set up a base in the Sinai. Temporary, of course, a military establishment, maybe a couple of bases, maybe 4 or 5. And then allow Israel to have access to those bases in Egypt. I mean, wouldn't that be something? So again, it sort of falls into the greater Israel project narrative, Hesher.
Yeah, and that could be. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, because all of a sudden, then you've got a Israeli / NATO / American sort of handle on that port of entry and exit, so that could be definitely something that they would be interested in. And you got to wonder, who does it benefit? Does this benefit Arab people in any way? Does this benefit people in the Middle East in any way? After the discussion last night, I would say Probably not. Our friends in the Middle East would probably say, no, this is a very bad thing for all of us.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the benefits. I think the great conversation we had. We had a couple of speakers from the region, obviously giving us their take and their opinion on what these characters and what these groups mean, and just kind of laying the groundwork and the scene for what's happened in Syria. And as this is unfolded in December, basically the al-Qaeda takeover, HTS, al-Qaeda takeover of Syria. This has given the West the precursors they're required for creating a narrative that al-Qaeda is on the move. And so it's so funny. It's the old problem reaction solution once again. They'll say, oh my gosh, it totally took us by surprise, Hesher. Al-Qaeda's taken over Syria. Look at this. Extremism is on the move. And obviously not talking about the fact that the Al-Qaeda HTS was watered, groomed, armed, trained, given endless support in the Islamic State of Idlib, the unofficial Islamic State of Idlib, right on the Turkish border within Syria's territory. And then that was viewed as a rebel enclave by our mainstream media, a rebel, quote, rebel enclave. And now they're all acting surprised about what happened. But this is exactly the result they wanted to happen. The United States, NATO, Turkey, Israel, they're waiting for this to happen, and they're very happy it's happened. Now, all the counterterrorism experts and the buffs and the intel guys, the intel bros on the podcast circuit, basically, the Taliban are inspired by al-Jilani's takeover of Syria. Again, this takeover sponsored by the U.S. But oh my gosh, the Taliban are on the move now. There's ISIS cells. There's ISIS-K, and al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda's back on the move. We're told anyway, Hesher, they want to avenge the death of Osama bin Laden. This is supposedly the motive for this, what some people, we'll show some clips in a second, are calling the Al-Qaeda invasion of America. That's going to happen in 2025. Have you got wind of any of this?
Yeah. And, it was already, as it was hard for Americans and people in the West to keep a tally on all these different terror groups. Like most people only have heard of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And if you're under a certain age, you probably don't even, understand what those two mean and, where they came from, who funded them, all that stuff. So their use in color revolutions and regime change and everything like that. So, it really helps to have these discussions, because I can't think of a show other than Sunday Wire and, some of our colleagues, mostly not broadcasting from America, who lay this out and help people understand it that want to know, because there's so many factions now. It's like you start breaking, ISIS-K, all these different groups out, and it just becomes like acronym soup almost to a lot of Americans. But I think we did a really good job with that last night, and Sunday Wire's always been here for our listeners and our viewers to help break that down, help understand it. You're always good about defining what some of these subsections of Wahhabi head choppers backed by Western countries, what it actually means, where they actually are, and what they might be up to. So it can be confusing for a lot of people, I think.
And we always try to share the information. Here's one of those threads we'll put up on screen here. We try to share the information with our audience. This was a really important thread that we shared during, I think, the last space here, based on the recent events in New Orleans and Vegas, especially New Orleans. The Vegas was a little bit of an oddball event. I think this was a more deep state, or who knows, it could even have been a psychotic event of a disturbed veteran there that unfortunately took place at the wrong location, that sparked all kinds of political intrigue anyway, revealed FBI's bogus counterterrorism racket staged terror in the U.S. And that's a link to a lecture by Trevor Aronson. And we scroll down here on this thread, we'll see some of our coverage in the past, Garland, Texas, where the FBI abetted ISIS, quote, ISIS terrorists. They're really handled by the FBI, and they got them to attack a Mohammed cartoon event, a provocation event staged by Pamela Geller and Gert Wilders in Garland, Texas. And CNN did the whole production. It was a CNN production. I mean, these people are absolutely shameless. And we find out later the FBI had a manager on site or a supervisor or something like that. And the shooter was radicalized by an FBI handler, confidential human source or informant or something or other. Anyway, they paid him $120,000 to take this young Muslim convert named Elton Simpson and turn him into an angry young convert from Phoenix, Arizona. Next thing you know, they're heading in a car to Garland, Texas. CNN's here with their special TAC teams providing security. These guys absolutely roided up. These super security guys with all the full TAC gear, the headsets, the whole thing, just for security. Hesher, they weren't expecting a terrorist to show up. But lo and behold, a terrorist did show up in the middle of the broadcast. I mean, this was something else. This was like Orson Welles' CNN production. It was absolutely incredible. Anyway, we covered that at the time. So we shared that in this thread. We'll also probably retweet this thread, or I'll put it down in the in the actual show post here on X. But anyway, that's just some of the information that we try to share with our listeners, our viewers as well. So you can check out again at 21 Wire. You'll see some of that material there. Hesher, Garland, Texas, not far from where you are, relatively speaking. Usually a sleepy, quiet town, but it wasn't that day, that fateful day in, I think it was 2015. The year of the Daily Shooter, 2015, will go down in history. That's probably the most audacious staged CNN, FBI, domestic terror event that we saw during that whole phase. I mean, it was just comical, but it wasn't, someone actually got shot. A couple of people got shot and killed, but I just put it up there, Hesher, as a classic case study.
Yeah. And that was 2015. That's right before Trump's first term, right? And so many things were different during Trump's first term, the nation and the national news, they moved more into cultural engineering to get to sort of outrage people on both sides, over, all the things that we've been talking about in the last 4 years that actually many of us were talking about in the 5 years leading up to that. So it was all, it's like the Daily Shooter program also, the Daily Shooter program kind of took a nap a little bit, like it didn't go away, but it definitely was not at the same, speed and intensity that it was going into 2015 as we came out into 2016. So it is a sort of a benchmark moment because it's kind of a combination of a Daily Shooter and a Daily Terror sort of event. And it's like, what did they stop from happening? Well, nothing, because if they hadn't have radicalized this guy, it wouldn't have happened at all. So essentially they ruined someone's life for a media stunt. They ruined multiple people's lives and put, people in danger. So, and it's not the first time they've done that. We covered on Space a couple weeks ago, went all the way back to 1993. Went back and looked at the original World Trade Center event. We also talked about the Newburgh sting. You could also throw in Ruby Ridge. You could also throw in the Branch Davidians. I almost said Branch Covidians habit. But these events all would have been very, very different if there wasn't a media narrative and entrapment set up as the goal and the context and the framework for the event. So again, who did they save? What did they stop from happening? Nothing. They caused the deaths of many people. and the potential harm and danger of even more people. We also talked about the Oklahoma City bombing, right?
Yeah,
Um,
BC. Yep.
so, we see this over and over again, and that pattern is very important for the wider public to recognize that this is going on. Most of these cases that we just talked about are just out there. The details eventually come out. You find out there are handlers there. You find out there's something that reeks of entrapment there, and then you see that once that's the case in the context, you see the propaganda, because the reporting does not match that. The mainstream reporting has a completely different goal than telling you the truth about what happened.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we'll show you some other examples there. I obviously always want to point people to this book here. Go to Amazon, or any fine bookseller should have The Terror Factory: Inside the FBI's Manufactured War Against Terrorism. So this Trevor Aronson, fantastic writer, great journalist. He's done a seminal piece of work here. He's done work for a couple of different outlets: The Intercept, Al Jazeera. He's an award-winning journalist, and basically chronicling the FBI's post 9/11 racket, where they're basically creating all of these terror cells, running entrapment, basically fabricating situations, and then busting them before something is supposed to happen. But as Hesher just said, if the FBI weren't involved, nothing would have happened. It's only because the FBI were creating these situations that anything did happen. They're trying to rack up these terror busts to show for the statistics for their performance for the year. So look at all these great domestic terror plots that we foiled here. Give us more money for next year's budget. I don't know. It's more than that. Obviously, this reinforces foreign policy for the U.S. It's not just about money. This is about reinforcing foreign policy. So that's why they run in the United States the Terror Factory. And we talked about OKC. We had David J. Riley as well in the space. He's a great independent journalist out of Idaho. And we talked about the domestic terror story, which is absolutely it's part and parcel with all of this, war on terror stuff that they're currently spinning up. But so I don't know if you managed to catch them. Maybe we'll do a review on it with David if we can get him on the show another time. But there's a film out called The Order, starring Jude Law. And it takes place in Coeur d'Alene. It's set in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, in western Washington, Spokane area in the 1980s. And it's interesting talking to an independent journalist who has more background information on this story. There's more to this story than the Hollywood gave it in their Hollywood treatment. But the principle of it was very similar to Gladio, basically using white supremacist or infiltrating the KKK groups, neo-Nazi groups, and then doing bank robberies, basically, almost like gangs, basically, and then using the takings from the bank robberies to build a war chest for a major domestic terror event or a major armed insurrection type event. And so the implication is in a lot of these things like Oklahoma City, Elohim City, where Timothy McVeigh and where the kind of incubation of the OKC operation took place, all under federal supervision, including federal psychiatrist Jolene West, as an example, who's also involved in a bunch of other interesting events, coincidentally. So if you believe in coincidences. So it's interesting how, and so when you watch these Hollywood films, Hesher, there's an entertainment value to it. So you're getting the story. The acting is phenomenal. Jude Law is phenomenal in this film. It's probably best film I've ever seen him in. And he's also playing an American character, which is not easy to do for some British actors. And the story's great, but there's a story behind the story, and Hollywood doesn't tend to show it. And at the end, they did a J6 propaganda spot at the very end of the film, which kind of ruined it for me. They put up one of those kind of slates up there right before the credits, and the music gets really solemn at the end, and the January 6th insurrection, da 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 da, and trying to tie that to the neo-Nazis of the 80s and stuff. It's just really weak, but it's typical. Hollywood just can't help themselves. I mean, they couldn't resist. So they said, let's ruin this good film with a little bit of propaganda just before Trump comes in and pardons all of them. Hesher, what about that?
Why would you, why would you at this point in the timeline? I don't understand why a filmmaker, I assume it's probably the production team or executive producers that can do that, or would do that. But at this point, like, you're essentially alienating half of your potential audience there. I think even mainstream conservatives at this point all know that J6 was a stitch up, and that so many of these contrived events, these events where people are hoodwinked into some sort of political action, a lot of that I think was practice for J6. J6 was like, because we look at cases like the ones we just mentioned, and it's like, you've got a couple of people, right, getting essentially stitched up, getting entrapped, getting I don't know, maybe entrapped isn't a word that those that do this would like me to use, but we see what you're doing, and it smells like entrapment to most Americans. That's the word that comes to mind for,
It
most
is.
logical people.
It effectively it fits the definition of
Yeah.
entrapment. But like a lot of people who work for the FBI or other pundits, oh no, it wasn't. It's technically not entrapment. But it is.
Yeah.
You're luring people in, giving them cash to buy illicit material for bomb making material or whatever. You're keeping minutes at the meeting. Come on, guys.
Yeah, it's a pretty weak argument to say, because what they would probably say is, no, these are just confidential informants, and they're just sort of nudging these people to hurry up and do what they were going to do anyways. Well, I'm sorry, you look at like Newberg Sting in particular, or the case that we talked about. We may have an article up at 21 on it, but I know Last American Vagabond has an article on, I think it was 2018, a mentally challenged child or, youth, parents caught an FBI handler trying to radicalize their son. So it's like, we have this litany of this scenario happening over and over again, but they all seem to kind of have been like precursors to J6, because J6 was just very similar, but it wasn't aimed at just a couple of people that, are vulnerable mentally, emotionally, whatever. It was aimed at the entirety of conservatives who were willing to activate, who were willing to go out and essentially do activism, and they stitched up over 1,000 people in that event. So anyway, back to it. I think that for a film like that to and I've seen so many shows on the streaming services like this too, even in comedy shows, stand-up comedy shows, where it's like you see it's a great performance, and then all of a sudden they just tank it by talking about J6 as though it was an actual insurrection. I'm sorry, how many people were there? How many people were there armed? Because usually an insurrection is an armed thing. I've never seen an insurrection where the authorities open the front door and where the insurrectionists walk in real slowly and take pictures of stuff and look around and don't disturb the velvet ropes and all that. It's just amazing that people still think that they can push that line, that mainstream media line. Hollywood would do itself a favor to just get away from that at this point, because you are alienating half your audience, at least, probably more than half now.
Yeah. I know. It's cell phones. Apparently, you can do an insurrection with cell phones. I think there's one guy that had tie wraps on him. He was, fed hunting. I mean, there's one guy who was kind of a funny character, and then there was obviously Jacob Chansley, the infamous Buffalo Man, and that was the media's favorite character for J6, and he was literally there as a performative, artist, basically, playing the role of Buffalo Man, patriotic Buffalo Man. Jacob Chansley. So, I mean, he wasn't armed or dangerous or anything like that. But yeah, and so now looking back at it, and the FBI, not the FBI, but Secret Service or somebody, forgot the gentleman shot and killed an unarmed protester named Ashley Babbitt. And of course, nobody wants to talk about that. So yeah, that was the deadly casualty on the day. And then all the federal informants running around. There's also DHS, probably people working for their Homeland Security, probably people working for contractors who are paid by Homeland Security. There's a couple of individuals that fit that MO. So all in all, you have, maybe quite a few actors, at minimum, many, many dozen federal actors and contractors on site. At maximum, probably more than 100. I would say, some of them provoking the crowd. And then you have the pipe bombers on J6. I mean, that's like that could potentially get blown open during the Trump administration. You know what's going to happen? This is how it goes, folks. We're telling you how Washington works. They have all of the goods on the FBI's fake pipe bomber, which they had set up as a type of a story, and it fizzled out. They didn't have a chance to run with that properly. But somebody's head should roll for that, but they won't, because there's horse trading going on. We won't press on that, but you've got to give us this. So this is how Washington works, folks. There is no justice. There's only horse trading that goes on. So the dirt becomes leverage. And that's unfortunately what's going to happen. I mean, I think anybody involved in egging that on the government side should at least go in front of a hearing, and maybe should be sentenced to do at least the amount of time or penalty that any of the people who just were charged and locked up and given federal felony cases for basically breaching the Capitol when the police let them in. I mean, if those people have done a year or a year and a half or 6 months or 3 months, I think any Fed who is an informant, or worse, any provocateur from the federal government or the DHS side, should do equal the time of whatever J6 protesters did. Equal.
Yeah, and in particular, their supervisors, not so much, I mean, yes, them, but also the public needs to know what the chain of command was there, which agencies had managers and supervisors that were directing these people. There's the guy that's in Bobby Powell's footage, famously breaking a window out and then blaming someone else and trying to get people to go through the window. Mm-hmm. There was the guy in the Shema wrap with the sunglasses and the baseball hat who was holding the door open. He looked very familiar from a side profile. I'm not going to name any names, but there's a good chance that's someone with a name some of us might recognize. And none of those people were ever called into trial. None of those people were ever named. None of those people did any time. And most people that deep research this think that those were exactly what you said, provocateurs.
Yeah, and too many of them. So hopefully this doesn't happen again. I mean, the fact that they allowed a protest to happen right at the Capitol at a time when they were doing congressional business inside, to me, is very sus, because there's many times you can't get near the Capitol. There's huge barriers that are normally put up, and that was suspended on the day. So, I mean, yeah, if you think people are stupid enough to believe that wasn't absolutely orchestrated and staged beforehand to get a certain result, and they got the political result they wanted, and they tried to squeeze and use every drop of that for years after, in order to obviously demonize the Trump MAGA movement, kill the Republican Party's chances in the midterms and in 2022, and then ultimately try to knock Trump out of the race for 2024 election. And they nearly did. And they had a bunch of contingency plans for this, kept using it, kept leveraging this. But also it sends a message out to activists, which is you will be politically persecuted if you're on the wrong side of the aisle. And the government is going to do that, and all the state organs are going to conspire to make that happen. That's a really dark sort of message being sent by the state. That's the kind of authoritarian stuff that we decry when we see it overseas in other countries. It's the type of thing we think Russia and China do to their citizens. But these elaborate entrapment schemes, I don't even think the Russians and the Chinese are so brazen as these deep state jackals in Washington, that to dream up this stuff and then to get the media on board to orchestrate the narrative. And that's one of the things when we're talking about the war on terror 2.0, and obviously we covered this last night. And this is the thing, Hesher. You've got the overlap of you've got mainstream media, you've got now independent mainstream or alternative mainstream, as we like to call it, the YouTube podcast circuit. Then you've got the government, okay? Then you've got, law enforcement, counterterrorism. You've got the intelligence community, okay? They all overlap. And so that then you can, let's say an event happens, a New Orleans type event. I say New Orleans type event. Let's say that happens. Then you have to have the media basically lined up to be able to manage the story. Then you have to have the right experts to come on to talk about it. And then you have to have the right witnesses handy. And then you have to have the right journalists to go into the home of the alleged perpetrator 24 hours after the event to do a guided tour of the perpetrator's house. And we've seen this pattern used over and over. Orlando Pulse nightclub, San Bernardino in 2015. And again in New Orleans, and then this other sideshow in Las Vegas with the Cybertruck, and then how that thing was laundered through the celebrity intel bro of Navy SEAL podcast circuit, and it just looks like, and we'll share a clip with you in a moment, Hesher. But if you can control all of these different nodes of an event, the media coverage is very important. The narrative management, very, very important. Then the politicians can go take the podium and confidently reiterate that narrative. It's already been inculcated into the brains of the public by then. And this is how I think the propaganda is much more, Hesher, a lot more sophisticated now. And I think it's actually very effective. It's very effective on a level, I think, even deeper than the mainstream media did. However, there's also a lot more people that are awake to this at the same time. That's why it's getting very interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, it absolutely is. You're dealing with this juxtaposition of a large segment of the populace that now has a ever shrinking attention span and IQ because of the media environment, the educational environment, everything. The way culture is right now, the way 21st century culture is, and the way that a lot of people's emotions and context for reality is simply a follow the bouncing ball of today's doom scroll. That has set up an environment where they can come out with these absurd narratives with that sort of fusion between mass media cartels, intelligence agencies, politicians, deep state entities, military industrial complex entities, and they can just weave this absurd narrative that unfolds in a way that those with the attention span of a goldfish can be sucked in. So, they're leveraging that. They're leveraging that. But at the same time, to your other point, we've been doing this sort of busting of that system for well over a decade now. Riding on the analysis and success of people that were doing it before us, and learning as we go, to the point now where a lot of the analysis techniques that we've used have become, dare I say, somewhat mainstream. And then there's also this intuitive knowledge that a lot of people have, even if they're not steeped in it like we are, and many of our viewers are. They have an intuitive knowing that something's not right here, and that they're being lied to. So the combination of that group of intuitive folks and deep researchers is sort of putting a thumb on the scale, because for the longest time it was way out of whack. People had a lot more trust in the mass media than they do now post COVIDocracy.
Yeah, and it's also, being able to talk to independent researchers and journalists who are really steeped in some of these topics. As we spoke to David J. Riley last night, who's got a lot of on the ground experience, very much up close experience with a lot of these things, that some of them become national stories. Then there's a lot of these setups that aren't national stories, not really. And if you don't hear the info from some of these researchers and independent journalists, then you won't know about it. But when he was talking about some of these FBI setups and these shady operations up in the Pacific Northwest, and literally alarm bells were going off, because I was like, I kept seeing all the exact same MO, same operation details as some of these other cases. So you can kind of, after a while, if you really know the subject matter well and you've done good reading on it, you can kind of detect when you're looking at one of these sort of setups, cut out organizations, obvious cutout organizations. I mean, we do a lot of this stuff working internationally, looking at how the CIA have all these sort of media outlets and Bellingcat type operations they've set up, these cutout organizations to provide what looks like open source raw intelligence, and then the media hoover it up. The New York Times, the Guardian will run with it and say independent research outlet Bellingcat has found these evidence of chemical weapons in Syria, or the downing of MH17 was Putin, and they've got intercepted this and hacked that and leaked that, passport images magically appeared on BitTorrent. So, oh my gosh, where did they come from? But these great gamers that work for Bellingcat, they discovered this stuff because they're so talented. They recruit these gamers, Hesher. They're just really, really talented at finding this stuff. The breadcrumbs weren't dropped for them and told where to go look for them. No. They're just really talented, autistic Asperger's gamers. They're that good.
Yeah, they take time out of their busy Halo schedule, gaming schedule, to do some geopolitical deep diving, and this is ridiculous. It's more laundering of intel agency propaganda and consolidating resources. We've seen a lot of resource consolidation, and information resources are to be included in that. BlackRock is sucking up all of the homes, and yes, Vanguard and State Street are pushing DEI, and taking all this, trillions of dollars. Yes, all this is happening, but at the same time, that same consolidation is happening in the information sphere, in the social media sphere, in the news sphere. And this is a big part of why they want to see TikTok go away. This is a big part of why AI has been inserted into everything. This is also probably a big part of why Mark Zuckerberg thinks he can rebrand himself and say, we're going to get rid of the fact checkers, guys. Sorry about that. Check out my new haircut. I got the Spicoli cut going. I'm hanging out with Joe Rogan. you know.
Maybe getting high, maybe getting high. I mean, so he totally rebranded Zuckerberg. I mean, it's like he went from Data and Star Trek to Spicoli. Like I was shocked when I saw him. What's going on here? I guess he's going through his wild phase. He's done well. He's made the money, and he's just surfing now. He's not really involved in day-to-day operations. I wasn't involved in that censorship stuff.
They yelled at us. We didn't know what to do. Oh my gosh, Joe, hand me that blunt.
So much pressure. I mean, this guy writes checks out to the Democrats for ungodly sums of money. He basically bought the result for the 2020 election in favor of Biden, like literally his 300, 400 million or whatever he did with his quote targeted poll workers and all in the drop boxes and Zucker boxes and all this stuff. I mean, like he has to kowtow to the federal government to enforce censorship. He did it willingly. He did it with a smile. You can guarantee that was just so disingenuous to watch Zuck go. And I'm telling you, Zuckerberg, you've made so many people's lives miserable over the last 6-8 years through like rolling ban, censorship, and what the worst part about Mark, okay, and Meta is that when you ban people, you're preventing them from having normal communications with their own family members. People like family who DM, who share birthdays, family events. Okay, I was subject to those sort of suspensions and bans and all sorts of stuff. Not able to use DMs or something like that, all because of this incredible spook security state apparatus that you let fester at Meta. And, your head of trust and safety is a CIA agent, Aaron Berman. Yeah. Oh, he got promoted, Hesher, to head of global election integrity. So, hey, he's done such a good job on censorship. So you got a CIA spook, literally briefed the president, the CIA agent who briefs the president, put him in charge of trust and safety, which is translated censorship, and clamping down on political speech or anything that's inconvenient to the government or its allies overseas. And you put him in charge of global election integrity. So Facebook can put its thumb, Meta can put its thumb on the scales of any election around the world for whichever direction they choose. They have that power, and they will bend to the will of whatever government, U.S. friendly government, is asking them to do. Whatever, they will do it, and they've shown that. They'll go for, if it's a Marxist government, they will bend in their favor. If it's a fascist, they'll bend in their favor. It's a monarchy, it doesn't matter. As long as Facebook and Meta can operate in that market, that's first priority. Second priority is what does Washington want? That's how it works. It's that simple. So
yeah, and look at what just happened in Romania. It was in Romania, right, where they suspended or they did not certify an election because of supposedly because there was a TikTok campaign that they can just claim that there's a TikTok campaign that has somehow influenced the election. Where have we seen that one before? Oh yeah, it was the Moldavian 23-year-olds with the little side ads on Facebook, right? They bought some ads and try to say that was, election interference. So, do we really want CIA officers working at Facebook, telling people about what's the integrity of global elections? Like a story like that comes out and it's just like, no, this does look like election interference, but it looks more like, there are international deep state interests behind that, more so than any actual, social media oriented or grassroots oriented sort of disruption.
No, absolutely. And the Twitter files revealed all. The Twitter files revealed all. And what I try to explain to people, Hesher, is that just because you saw what's in the Twitter files, me, myself, finding myself in the Twitter files as well, but just because we could see all of that, Global Engagement Center, all of that, we knew all that was going on, even some of those groups that were exposed I was already on their sort of lists beforehand, which we found out via, the University of Washington and whatnot. But that's just what we've seen. There's no Facebook files. There's no YouTube files. Independent journalists haven't been able to rifle through the Google files. What other lists? Deplatforming, deranking. We got deranked in April of 20. I think it was Operation Owl or one of those Google ops. It was April 2017, after Trump got elected, and hundreds and hundreds of websites basically got downgraded. So almost nothing on organic searches, and of course the advertising revenue collapsed with all of these websites. So it was a very successful political targeting operation done by Silicon Valley. And so we won't know how many spooks are in key positions at Google and YouTube, also at Meta. But with what we did find out, the little we did find out, was shocking. It was really something else. And it just shows you how much they were trying to control the narrative. They ruined a lot of independent, bona fide, legit independent journalists and media outlets. They made it impossible for them to have reach, impossible for them to monetize. Why? To preserve a political order and to protect the deep state.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can't even post a link to alternate current radio on Facebook. Ruckus sent me a screenshot yesterday. He was, putting a post up in our Facebook group to, point to a new show on alternate current radio. And we get a message saying that our website doesn't exist. So how does that work? Zuckerberg says he's going to stop the censoring over, I don't even know. I was never told what I said wrong on there to be shadow banned, to be demonetized, to be deplatformed, to be all these things. And it's still that way. It's still that way. He's literally sitting there with Joe Rogan with a blunt, probably in the room. I didn't actually watch the whole thing. Couldn't sit through it. It makes my stomach turn. While I can't post a link to my website. Like, what the hell is that? And, Patrick, back in 2023, I believe, we had a guest here on Sunday Wire with us. Maybe you can put this on the screen. It's down there in the backstage. He goes by Name Redacted. And look at this. Look, here he is on Twitter. It's pinned at the top of his page. Recommend you follow Name Redacted if you want to go look at the receipts for this. He says, why has Meta hired more than 160 individuals from the U.S. intelligence community since 2018? Is the Global Engagement Center directly providing funding to Meta? Is this a modern day version of Operation Mockingbird? And then he goes through the numbers there. And look, he's got these people's LinkedIn accounts. He's got these things. So 14 CIA, 26 FBI, 16 NSA, 29 DHS, State Department, 32 employees, and DOD, 49 employees. So, and this is an older post. This is back in the transitional phase, I believe, between Twitter 1.0 and X, Twitter 2.0. And he goes on, after learning that Twitter employs at least 15 former FBI agents, I searched Facebook. What I found is alarming. Facebook currently employs at least 115 people in high-ranking positions. And that's updated, so it's even more than that. And then he talks about how the GEC was established in the 2017 NDAA. That is the place where a lot of money gets laundered and programs get started that no Americans voted for and no Americans would want if they knew what their goals were. So you can find all this on his X account, and you can find him speaking with us about this in the archives back in 2023.
Yeah, no, great research, great resource, and thank you for bringing that up, Hesher. I really appreciate that, because that's the real meat. And it's like the Matt Taibbi, Paul Thacker, and all these, Michael Schellenberger, and others. They did the work of going through there, and then other Twitter accounts, other users and researchers did a refinement of some of that information, again, focusing on some of these important areas. And Name Redacted did a good job basically highlighting some of that stuff. I mean, it's pretty shocking. I remember watching the Zoom calls that they made public, and they even uploaded onto Vimeo and YouTube of them having meetings talking about how they were, doing all of plotting and planning all this stuff between all of these people from these different companies and the spooks that were working for them. These are people who you go look at their LinkedIn profiles, Hesher, and literally jumping from the NSA and the DHS and the CIA straight into Meta. Like, how did that happen? Like, did they get a tip off of the job board looking for trust and safety experts, censorship experts, looking for someone qualified, blah, 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 public administrative experience recommended, da, da, da. No, this was basically an outsourcing of the intelligence services into Silicon Valley, a direct pipeline. That's what it was. And so while they're working, maybe they're taking a paycheck from a Silicon Valley company, one of these big tech firms. They're really working on behalf of, and really probably under the direction of, at some level anyway. In the case of Twitter, we found out that it was literally had the FBI. I think what was his name? Was it Steve Baker, the FBI lawyer at Twitter, like the guy. Yeah, I mean, one of the main Democrat sort of it was Obama administration guys or whatever, FBI guy, basically embedded in with these people have access to your DMs. They're monitoring communications, probably tracking activists, journalists. Who knows what they were up to? We heard that they had access to, some of these people admitted they had access to DMs, and then the FBI putting pressure to take down posts, to take down accounts. Elvis Chan, all of that evidence that was that came out in the Twitter files as well. That's just what we saw, folks. That's not the totality of what's there. The totality of what's there is if you look in the basement at YouTube, look in the basement at Meta, and see what games and chicanery has been going on with Instagram and Facebook, and the damage these people have done. And for Mark Zuckerberg to do this mea culpa tour, trying to rebrand himself. I mean, it's smart of him to do it. Try to at least endear himself to some section of the population, rather than the rest of them that would basically just cut and run, or complete denial, and maybe probably scrubbing their resumes as we speak. At least Zuckerberg, I guess took one for the team, and came out and did what he did. But I'm not sold at all with this Spicoli haircut. Hesher has not fooled me one bit with regards to Zuck. I'll bring this up here. I'm gonna look at this character, Mr. Jack Dorsey, the man himself, the man of the hour, Big Jack. We'll see, here he is. I think we've got him on screen. Yeah, there he is. So yeah, this during COVID did a really good job of nuking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of accounts, plus tons of conservative accounts in that massive purge before the 2018 midterms. You remember that?
Oh yeah. We had already been purged pretty heavily at that point, but yeah, then it became even bigger, and we were pointing out on the boiler room before last, Meta's involvement with NATO's Atlantic Council and their digital forensics lab, which is directly connected to probably a lot of those government hires within Meta. Well, Meta is, as Odd Man Out pointed out in the tweet thread on this, our buddy Odd Man Out, you can listen to his podcast at Alternate Current Radio. He says Meta is a top funder of NATO's Atlantic Council and a gold member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Therefore, Zuck is part of the military-industrial complex. You know what I mean? It's a very simple set of logic. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out, and then to have him, show up on Joe Rogan and claim, oh, I was bullied by the Biden. You know what I mean? It's just like, who's buying this?
Like, who is bullying him? Jen Psaki?
Yeah.
Jen Psaki bullying you, Mark?
Or is it all these spooks that you've hired? Is the bullying coming from within? Is it really bullying? If you were a private company CEO and all of a sudden you discovered, oh wait, I've got 100 and some odd security state people working for me. Oh my gosh, how'd this happen? I'm so sorry, everybody. Yeah, right. Yeah, right, dude.
So this is one of those glory pieces run by, I think it was Vanity Fair during COVID. Just praising Jack Dorsey for all the censorship he was doing during COVID. And this guy destroyed Twitter, destroyed faith in big tech, almost single-handedly. Basically, opened the back door in San Francisco and said to every three-letter agency, "Come on in." He was like a Portuguese matador. In a white coat, just basically, yeah, come on in, straight in the back, guys. Take over whatever floor you want to take over. It's all yours. Twitter's yours. Shut everybody down. We don't care. I don't care. I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. I'm off to a steamboat for skiing this winter. So just see you guys later. Have fun. Here's the keys to the head office in San Francisco. Thanks, Jack. And where's Jack Dorsey now? He's hiding, basically. You hardly see the guy. Blue Sky is an abject failure. So he helped build Twitter. He didn't invent Twitter, much like Elon. He's not the inventor. He's just the guy that became the face of the organization.
Same with Zuck. He didn't invent Facebook. He didn't even steal it from the Winklevoss twins. It was most likely a CIA project called LifeLog.
Well, there you are. Yeah, that's another interesting conversation. So anyway, that's Jack. We won't beat on him anymore, but very dubious character. What we're going to do is I want to share a clip with you as well. And what we'll do on that, let me share this clip with you. And this is, we'll go to look at what Max Blumenthal said about this first. And let's see what Max said here. We'll bring this up on screen. So here, I don't know if you have a good view of this, everybody, but so Max Gray Zone, he's saying former CIA targeter. He's talking about Sarah Adams. There she is, Sarah TPA, Sarah, and she's doing the rounds. She's of the Sean Ryan show, which first obtained the Cybertruck bomber manifesto. Has to be one of the biggest fraudsters in the counterterrorism industry, says Max, which is filled with them. She's selling low IQ MAGA types on the inevitability of a 9/11 style attack, but it's more like a Hamas attack. They can't make up their mind. Hamas is supposedly on the move, even though they're under rubble in Gaza. But anyway, don't let the facts or reality get in the way of a good narrative. So this Hamas attack or 9/11 style attack inside America, as Max saying here, Adams' sources are unnamed, referred to simply as, quote, we, because they don't exist, says Blumenthal. If she had any classified info, revealing on a podcast, of course, would violate top secret security clearance, which she supposedly possesses. All good points here. And naturally, she prescribes more mass surveillance and, of course, more invasive things at airport security as the only logical response to the imminent 9/11 Hamas October 7th suicide bomber mega attacks on the homeland. So she's talking about this interview here, and this is incredible. Now, I'm going to play that interview in a moment, and let me bring up some of the other bits and pieces regarding that. But I'm going to bring up the actual interview, Hesher, and we're going to listen to this clip, and it's absolute classic, one of the best. I think you might have even shared some of this during the space the other night here. So I'm going to bring on, this is the one I reposted here. Let's bring this up. And so there it is. So my headline is Miss South Carolina meets Homeland, Claire Danes. That's what it kind of felt like. So yeah, Miss South Carolina, we'll tell you what that energy is all about in a moment. But let me bring that up here and just see. We're going to have a listen to this. Interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the best kind of entertainment you could possibly get with the thrills and everything else. Have a listen.
What do you anticipate these attacks looking like? Are we going to see these quote unquote one-offs like?
Can you hear that okay, Hesher?
Yeah, we got it.
You got that? Okay, we'll go back.
What do you anticipate these attacks looking like? Are we going to see these quote unquote one-offs like in New Orleans, just randomly and with more frequency? Do they have an October 7th style assault planned? What are you expecting?
So we have both. So we're first going to see the one-offs, and then we're probably going to see at least one U.S. embassy overseas targeted. And then there is a large 9/11 style attack, but it's more like the Hamas attacks or like the Mumbai plot, from 15 years ago. And how the terrorists were trained, at least, is they went through urban warfare training and they went through suicide bomber training. We believe about 10% of the attackers will be suicide.
Hold on, time out. Little yellow card. So they've gone through urban warfare, at least one U.S. embassy. It sounds like they know about all their training. They know what all their targets are. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm a simple guy. Obviously, Hesher, I don't have a PhD in counterterrorism. But does this mean the CIA has been doing the urban warfare training? And does CIA know what the targets of the operations are? Because she's got this granular detail, Hesher, of these terrorist operations that are inevitably coming in 2025. Too much detail. It even knows how many cities they're going to attack. So how come they can't stop them then?
Yeah, they seem to she seems to claim to have all of the W4, right? The who, what, the when, where. And of course, we all know the why. They hate us because of our freedom. If that still sticks in anybody's head.
No, there's an extra bit of narrative there. No, apparently they're upset about the death of Osama bin Laden.
Oh yeah, right.
So that's the motive. They want to avenge bin Laden after all these years. Suddenly, it's the bee in the bonnet of al-Qaeda. Oh my God, these Americans, they've killed bin Laden. We haven't done anything about this. Let's do something. Let's do something in 2025.
Yeah.
Let's do some Mumbai.
Yeah, we'll just hold out for a decade or more while all this stuff, this terrible things happen to Arab people all over the Middle East. Al-Qaeda does and ISIS do nothing to help any of them. They do nothing against Israel. They do only things that hurt people in the places that they live. They're disrupting, they're causing violence, they're doing ethnic cleansing, they're attacking Christians and Alawites, they're hanging people, they're stealing Rolexes, they're setting up fake media via things like the White Helmets with Western funding, NATO advanced knowledge and Western funding, our media jumping in on that to support those narratives. So yeah, it's totally normal that these groups would wait all this time, and it's totally normal for Americans to think that the rest of the Muslim and Arab world is so upset about a CIA asset named Osama bin Laden, who was not even in Afghanistan when they killed him. Like everybody's on board with that. Are you kidding us, Sarah Adams? Do you really think people are going to buy this? Well, apparently some do, but more and more people are not buying it, and we're going to keep talking about this because we see what you're laying the groundwork for here, and what you're laying the groundwork for apparently is a global war on terror 2.0 that has come home to roost here in the United States. You're pushing, and at the same time, you're pushing the narrative that domestic right-wing extremism at home is of equal, odious intent, and that's why you saw a two-sided psyop coin at the first of the year, where you've got a Green Beret, who's probably someone, if the story's above board, which is questionable, but if it is, probably someone who's suffering from CTE, PTSD, traumatic breaks, and took his own life. All right. But instead, you want to say that it's, you know, a right-wing radical, someone who's, you know, been radicalized by narratives on the internet, worried about Chinese drones and aliens and, you know, anti-gravitic technology and all this stuff. And then you've got the radicalized by ISIS guy on the other side of the coin. So it's like, those are the two groups that you're trying to demonize, Sarah. And you should be ashamed that one of those groups is our own veterans here in this country, many of whom are suffering from a 20-year-long war, the effects of a 20-year-long war that should have never been.
And of course, the U.S. intelligence service had nothing to do with any of this. They don't have any contacts in any of these radical Islamist terrorist organizations. They have no contact at all with al-Qaeda, not involved with HTS in Idlib, none of that, nope. And of course, any of the various and sundry affiliates in and out of Syria through Turkey and Jordan. Oh, the training base in Al-Tanf, that's interesting. Let's not talk about that now. Camp Bucha, we talked about some of the famous alumni there. So, of course, our Western intelligence agencies aren't involved in any of this stuff. And Israeli intelligence is even more innocent. They're whiter than white. They're not involved with any of this. Let's listen to the rest of this. Highly entertaining.
Suicide bombers, but we also believe the suicide bombings aren't just going to occur on land. They're also going to occur in the air on airplanes.
Gosh, that is so freaky. That is so freaky. What do you anticipate?
So suicide bombs on planes. That's interesting. A new threat, creative. You can see the host there, Liz Wheeler. I think she was shocked and appalled at the possibility there. I was just getting vibes. I mean, we talk some strange vibes off that one. So Hesher, I mean, it's just ridiculous. They're really pushing this hard. They're paving the way, as you said, to create a war on terror type narrative, so that when these things start unfolding, the public has already been primed. The asphalt, the narrative asphalt already been laid, and all you have to do is just drive your propaganda truck right down that road, and everybody will just fall in line, and all the spooks and Intel Bro podcasts will say, oh, of course this is totally plausible. We had Sarah Adams talking about it 3 times on our podcast. Sean Ryan could just kick back and be cool about it. Say, yeah, man, we covered this on our broadcast. We warned you about this. We told you to shut that border. It's exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah.
By the way, we want to buy my new phone here. So it's just ridiculous. I mean, but this is where it is. This is the new mainstream media.
No, it's really unfortunate. Sean Ryan, I don't know if you know what you're doing or not, but the effect of this is you're nerfing our veterans. If something bad happens in this country, we need our veterans on board. And if something bad happens in this country and it's due to a corrupted intelligence set of services and corrupt government narratives, you're taking all of those veterans that watch your show and respect you and look up to you and think that, you know, your guests are always credible, and you're pointing them in the wrong direction. You're gaslighting them to go back to GWOT 1.0, Global War on Terror 1.0 mindsets of the Muslims are the bad guys. Well, maybe they're not. You know, everything we're laying out here indicates that there is a corruption in our government, in our DOD, in our intelligence services that are willing to lie to the American people, to lie to the world, to make fake terror to support war. Okay. And if this is the predictive programming that says, hey, it's coming home to roost, you're gaslighting your team members, you're gaslighting American civilians that look up to you, and you're participating either wittingly or unwittingly in a massive psyop here that could end up being very detrimental to all of us and detrimental to that oath that you took as a military member?
All of them, you know, you take an oath, you work for any of these government agencies or law enforcement, defend the U.S. Constitution, all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, if you're violating the U.S. Constitution or impeding the rights or directly violating the rights of American citizens, then you're kind of an enemy of the Constitution, foreign or domestic. And so many cases of this. I mean, January 6th is a perfect example. And then, of course, we're talking about government, you know, employees or spooks, ex-spooks working for private companies, supposedly as private employees of, you know, Meta or Twitter Inc. or Alphabet, and basically colluding with the federal government to deny the First Amendment rights of millions of Americans. And not only that, denying that access to that information to the entire populace and globally. And you're censoring other countries as well, denying them their rights in their local countries. I mean, wow, it's quite an operation. And if you're not calling it out, especially if you're in the system, you're from the system, you're in the system, or you're from the system, you're not calling that out, you're doing a huge disservice to the principles that you claim to uphold, that we all you know, that those of you swear an oath to defend and protect. I guess it doesn't matter when as soon as you're working for a private firm, I guess all that's suspended, isn't it? Then you're clear. You're clear. You can do whatever you want. I'm here with Hesher, Bryan McClain, host of the Boiler Room on ACR. Hesher, we're going to take a break in just a moment here. Just give a shout out to your program, Hesher, where people can find the Boiler Room on ACR.
Alternate Current Radio is our website. Please visit it. Please share it around. You'll find myself and my colleagues live in the Boiler Room Thursday nights. The archives are up there at alternatecurrentradio.com. We usually go live between 9 and 10 Eastern Time, PM. So join us for the live show. And yeah, that's where you'll find me in the Boiler Room, alternatecurrentradio.com, here on Sunday Wire. We've got a bunch of great shows over there at ACR, to include this one, the Daily Ruckus, the Odd Man Out podcast, Mystical American Patriot Society, and more. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And Patrick, I see people asking about Basil in the chat, and I think Basil might be joining us after the break here. So
Yes.
looking forward to that.
We do have Basil, and we're also going to talk about Elon Musk and some of his exploits and his involvement in the military-industrial complex. Very interesting. We'll do that after the break as well. I'm here with Hesher. Of course, we'll be joined by Basil Valentine after the break. At the moment, we're going to take a short break here for the Alternate Current Radio Network, and we'll say enjoy the music of some of our favorite artists during this break, namely Joseph Arthur. We'll be featuring Joseph Arthur, Red Rumble, and Peter Conway, three great independent bands and artists. We'll be back after these short musical interludes. I'll call them pieces of art. Absolutely brilliant. We'll see you in a moment.